Welcome to the Region Free Gamers Podcast, Episode 1.
Are you ready?
This is the Region Free Gamers Podcast, and I'm your host for today, Masa. And I have a few co-hosts with me, and we should probably first talk about what this podcast is about before we actually introduce ourselves. So who wants to tell the world who we are and what this thing is?
Hey Masa, my name is Ozzy, and we'll introduce ourselves in a little bit, but the Region Free Gamers Podcast is basically a podcast where individuals from around the world, can get together and talk about our favorite hobby, which is gaming. In the past, everything was region locked. If you were in the Paul territories in Europe or if you were in the United States, you didn't necessarily get all the same games, you didn't get the same experiences, but nowadays those boundaries are breaking, like the Berlin Wall, everything is falling. And this, Skype-enabled podcast, allows us to really talk with individuals from around the world and really get together and share our experiences growing up in different parts of the world. So we expect to have guests from all over the world, including places as far away as Siberia, Brazil, Portugal, Japan, everywhere all over. And all of us have our own individual, story, and we're all from different parts of the world. But that's basically the gist of who we are as a podcast.
And when it comes to games, we have no limitations. We will talk about both retro and modern games. We will talk about quite possibly every possible console from Atari to Turbo Graphics 16 to the Switch, PS4, Xbox, you name it. There will be no limits when it comes to the content. But speaking of which, we are actually going to start with the Game of the Year discussion. That's one of the biggest things with this first episode.
Not to step on you there, Masa and Ozzy. My name is Paul, and I'm glad that we're discussing what we're going to be talking about. But let's just talk about ourselves real quick before we get on to the 2017 Game of the Year. Masa, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so I'm the token European guy with a funny accent, because you gotta have one of those. Because it would be boring if we were all if we all had the Canadian accent or the American accent or whatever. So you gotta have one European dude. And I was born in 1983. I actually got my first console in 1990, and of course it was the NES. In Finland, Master System, and Paul, I know you will be proud of us Finns for this, but Master System was fairly popular. I would say it was it wasn't on the same level as the NES, but it was definitely relevant here.
Yeah.
And I still my first experience with video games was on the first grade. One of my classmates, dude was hey Masa, I got this new, video game system, and I have Super Mario. I actually don't remember if I actually knew about video games before that or but I ended up at his place. We played Mario, and I was oh my god, this is the coolest thing ever. And then I went home later that day, and I was I started begging for my parents to get me an NES. And a few months later, I got my, my very own NES, and I became a gamer for life, and especially a Nintendo fan. I do love the other systems as well, but Nintendo will always be I will always love Nintendo the most, I guess. And I must admit that I'm a bit biased towards Nintendo.
You're a fanboy, Masa. It's okay. You can admit it.
Yeah. Totally I just have to admit it, but I'm a bit of a Nintendo fanboy, but I have a fairly large PlayStation collection as well, so I won't just be talking about Nintendo games, but anyways.
We won't let you.
Thanks. So yeah, Ozzy, you wanna introduce yourself next?
Yeah, sure. I was just talking a lot without necessarily introducing myself. So my name is Ozzy, and I am the token Hispanic guy. Even though Artie's also Hispanic, but I have the sweet Latin accent, that ladies go crazy for. And I was born 1989. And it's funny because that was the same year of the fall of the Berlin Wall, which is the second time I referenced the Berlin
This is
Wall.
all very timely. I love these timely Berlin Wall
There's
references. Keep going, guys.
yeah, there's a reasoning for that because you see, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, I was born in Cuba, and Cuba was part of the former Soviet bloc. And before 1989, basically there was very little outside influence in terms of media. And after 1989, you pretty much started seeing a constant trickle, even though a very gradual constant trickle of foreign media from the capitalist pigs up north. That's when you started seeing Nintendo Entertainment System consoles and the like. And it's funny because even though I was born 1989, you would expect me to, be a contemporary of the Super Nintendo or the PlayStation and the like. But really, my first game experience was a Nintendo. And much like a lot of gamers out there, the first memory that I have of really enjoying a game was Duck Hunt. And the fact that I could, use this gun, to point at the screen and shoot down ducks. And there was a duck that would laugh at me, after I missed. I mean, that was pretty exciting for, a 5-year-old. And so from that point forward, I think, it just became a lifelong passion for it. And it was also the cartridge that had Duck Hunt and Super Mario Brothers. So it was a 1-2, punch of the two games that really inspired me to, take up this hobby. My first console, though, was actually the PlayStation. So in that sense, I'm very much a contemporary. And I lived in Cuba until I was 10. And from that point forward, I became more of a contemporary game player. So played the PS2 and on and so forth. So I now, I'm based in New York now. I collect for every type of system from the Nintendo Entertainment System going forward. Don't care much for a lot of the systems before that, besides the Game & Watch. Atari wasn't really my thing, but anything from the Nintendo Entertainment System forward is really what I am into. And when I say Nintendo Entertainment System, that also means the Famicom. So basically 1983 on, which coincidentally is also, the first year that Sega's console also came out. So it's interesting, I mean, I don't really confine myself to any one console, and I don't see myself as any type of fanboy. If I had any type of allegiance, it would be to Sony, since I've kind of stuck with them for all these years. But I equally like all of them. So that's basically my background. So,
by the way, before
Paul,
we
maybe you can tell us a
continue,
little bit more.
like, does anyone, like, I did that intro, or and I mentioned that we will be covering everything from Atari. Like, I mean, I have never even touched an Atari console. So, do we actually have any Atari, gamers here?
I played it a little bit when I was a kid, but
Okay.
It was actually after I played games on the Master System and the NES, funnily enough. I guess you could have called 9-year-old me playing Atari retro. So it didn't really resonate with me the same way that the 8-bit consoles and onward did. There was definitely a generational break there. But in any case, you know what? Arnie, I haven't heard from you yet. Come on, man. Tell me about yourself.
Yeah. So my name's Arnaldo, Arnie for short. Born and raised in Puerto Rico, currently living in the United States. As far as my first video game memory, it's probably traces back to the Super Nintendo. I remember playing a lot of Mario World and Aladdin. That was like the big game for me. But I wasn't really a big video game player until the PlayStation 1 era, when I got a hold of a bunch of RPGs. And that's really when my love of video games really took root. Since then, I've been a pretty avid video game player, from everything from PS1, PS2, all the way to PS4, some Xbox, some GameCube, So if I have to say the PlayStation line, like the PlayStation family of consoles, has been my main focus in my video game playing life.
Yeah, likewise. And Arnie, I would say that RPGs were your awakening, of sorts. And so ever since then, you've been a gamer.
Yeah. It's weird because before I really started playing RPGs, video games were something that I played every once in a while, but I wasn't really passionate about. But once I saw what could be done in the medium in terms of like telling a really compelling story, that is just really engrossing, that's sort of the thing that really got me interested in it.
That's basically a lot of my story. Same, I mean, even though I didn't grow up with RPGs, because RPGs, are very text heavy, and because I lived in Cuba, we didn't really get any translations or the like. So RPGs were not really something that I grew up with.
Yeah, it was the same for me as well.
Yeah, so I really didn't experience RPGs until much later in my life. But it's a very common story, to be able to be involved in a narrative, for hours upon hours, and getting to travel with these characters. It's a big part of the appeal of RPGs. So definitely sympathize with that.
I agree. That's how I started out as well. And just to round out the intros, my name's Paul. I am a Canadian, live in the Yukon right now. I started playing video games on the Sega Master System. It's a little bit strange, actually. The first game I played was Super Mario Brothers. I played it at a department store, and I was like, what kind of sorcery is this? This is insane. And we promptly went out and got a Master System, so I couldn't play Mario. The Master System came with 2 games, though, so, 2 games instead of 1 at the time. It was a pretty obvious choice. But in any case, I've owned almost every other system at one point or another. Much like with Arnie, I was a gamer, and then I got Phantasy Star for the Master System, and then that was when I became a gamer for life, pretty much. I have no credentials at all for talking about games. I've written a total of 0 articles for numerous websites. You should take my opinion very seriously. My voice carries a lot of weight. No, it's okay. We don't really need a lot of credentials here. We're just going to talk about games and have fun, right?
Yep.
True that.
And Paul, you're our resident old guy. So
oh my God, yeah.
We're gonna rely upon you on your experience, on your years of gaming experience.
I know. I shook off the dust this morning. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, took your aspirin. You're good now.
My aspirin.
You're swinging. So Masa, you want to take it away with some of our games of the year?
Not yet, because I actually like Arnie made a very good point about like RPGs, how they were kind of like his awakening to become a gamer. For me, it was basically like my kind of like my reawakening when it comes to console gaming, because like I mentioned, I started with the NES, and then I was a console gamer mainly until the GameCube era. I've always been a PC gamer as well. Not so anymore. Not so much anymore, but yeah, after like the GameCube era, I actually became a PC gamer again, because as I mentioned, or as Paul mentioned, I'm a Nintendo fanboy, and I was not impressed with the Wii, and I was like, yeah, I mean, I actually got the Wii a few years late, and for the longest time I was actually a PC gamer. But then I got me a PS3, and then I started like going through like I picked up a few RPGs, and I was like, oh my God, like console games are actually like they are fun again. And then it kind of like opened my eyes for like all these like other kind of like games and experiences, because I hate to admit this, but like for the longest time I was a basically like a turn-based JRPG hater. I was like, yeah, though that's like literally like the worst genre of video games you can have. And nowadays, I mean, that's mainly what I play. So yeah, how people change and all that, but yeah, I mean, that was
it's okay, buddy. You're late, but you're still welcome to the party.
Yeah, but yeah, I was like,
And if I can give you any solidarity, I also felt the same way for a long time. I was like, why don't they move? I want to like swing my sword. Why do I have to wait?
But yeah,
So it was.
Yeah, I guess for me it was a bit of jealousy because, like I mean, I live in Finland, and back in the like when we had the golden era of RPGs, like the PlayStation 1, the Super Nintendo era, when we had like all the classics, we didn't really get those games. Like a lot of these games, well, first of all, a lot of these games were never released in the PAL region, and also a lot of these games were never localized, especially not in Finnish. Like, and when I was like in my early teens, I mean, I wouldn't have even been able to play a game like Final Fantasy because my English simply wasn't good enough to play those games. So, at the same time when a lot of people were, playing Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger, all these games, I was playing, NHL and Super Mario and, Super Metroid and that kind of games.
Yeah, makes sense, man.
Yeah. But that's what, makes this podcast interesting because, yeah, we have like such different backgrounds.
Yep.
But yeah, I think like before we get to the Game of the Year discussion, maybe we should talk about a little bit like about the games that we have played. Like let's say this past 2 months. And of course, if there are some games that you would include in your Game of the Year talk, then you can actually like save those for the Game of the Year segment. But yeah, like Paul, do you wanna go in first and talk about the whatever games you have been playing recently?
Well, what I've been playing recently, I've actually had a little bit of a renaissance this year as far as shoot 'em ups go. Definitely one of my favorite genres when I was a kid, and they fell out of favor, as you guys are all well aware, because once 3D graphics came around, you have all these new types of genres coming out. The old shoot 'em up just doesn't quite hold up the same way. But we've had a little bit of a renaissance on that genre lately, so I've been playing a lot of those this year. The past couple of months, I've been playing a lot of Caladrius Blaze. That game is a bit ridiculous. It's super fun, and it makes me feel really guilty, because every time you do well, your opponents, who are mostly women, have their clothes fall off.
So it's like the Senran Kagura of SMUPs.
Yeah, it is definitely the Senran Kagura of shoot 'em ups. I mean, it's a little bit less blatant, but I don't really know that makes it any better. But with that said, the game is like ridiculously fun. The weapons, there's so many different characters and weapons and stuff like that. You just don't really get tired of it. So I've been playing a lot of that. I've been getting my retro on too. I finally got, and I know you guys are sick of me talking about this outside of the podcast, but I've been playing a lot of Langrisser 2 for the past month. Langrisser 2 being the sequel to, and this is for like the 2 people or maybe 1 who know about this game, Warsong on the Genesis, which came out 25 years ago or what have you. Langrisser 2 is the sequel to that game that I never saw as a kid. I knew it was out there. I knew it was in Japan, but it just never came out in the US, much like many games. So I found a reproduction copy of it, and I bought it online. The copy is great. Like, it physically, the cartridge looks great. The box looks great. It has a 16-page instruction book. It's really nice. And the game is bonkers. Like, it's super addicting and so much fun. And it has that Langrisser music. It just takes you back to the 16-bit era. It's absolutely awesome. I can't stop playing it. I'm on the last level. No, I'm on the second last level now. So even though it's been awesome for the past 3-4 weeks, I'm looking forward to it being done. Beyond Langrisser 2, portable stuff, East 8.
Paul, and what type of game is Langrisser? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's
a strategy turn-based game? Or?
Yeah, it's a strategy turn-based game, a strategy RPG. If I was to come up with the closest corollary, it would be Fire Emblem. It's a little bit larger in scope than Fire Emblem. Fire Emblem, you have really big maps, but you still have individual characters, even though there are a lot of them. Whereas in Langrisser, you have large maps, individual characters, but you can also buy small armies for each character before you start each level. So the scope is a little bit bigger, and I would say it's the Fire Emblem. It would be like the Sega Fire Emblem. They kept going with the series throughout the Sega Saturn, and then they finished it up on the Saturn. If they've made any other Langrisser games beyond what was available on the Saturn, I'm not aware of them.
But you got my interest.
All you have to do is say Fire Emblem,
you
dude.
Get Fire Emblem.
Yeah, it's 100% like Fire Emblem, and I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say it's better. It's different, right? It's apples and oranges, but that would definitely be the closest corollary. And beyond Langrisser and Caladrius and the other shoot 'em ups, just my portable stuff that I take to work with me to play on break. So been playing a lot of Etrian Odyssey 5, Ys 8, and that's about it, guys.
Good. Arnie, can you tell us what you've been playing?
Yeah, it's been mostly Final Fantasy 15 right now. I started it maybe a couple weeks ago, so I'm trying to get deeper into it. I've heard it's a shorter-ish RPG, so I'm hoping that it doesn't destroy my life. And then besides that, it's mostly been a bunch of different portable stuff. I mostly play portable now because it's just easier. But I recently got into like Advance Wars 2 again because
so good.
It's like the 7th time that I've played it. What else have I been playing? Just I picked up this random DS game the other day called it's called Puzzle Expedition. I'm like a sucker for like really short contained like puzzle games. Like what was that one Game Boy game? Boxel, I think is what it was called. You guys heard of that one?
Oh man.
Yeah,
no, you're hearing crickets now.
Yeah. So basically, Boxel is just like this. It's a move the box sort of game. So it's like you start on a map and you have your little guy, and there's a boxes arranged in a certain way where you have to move them so you can escape the room that you're in. So it's sort of that kind of game where it's like you have to get to an endpoint, and here are the things that you can play with to do that. And so it's just like use your brain to sort of figure out what the quickest route is without screwing yourself over.
Man, is there a more difficult genre to describe with words than the puzzle game?
Well, that's because
I'm thinking.
There's puzzle games, but every puzzle game has sort of its own wonky mechanic. Like Yoshi's Cookie is I would consider sort of a puzzle tile match game, whereas this is sort of a puzzle escape the room game, things like that.
Yeah.
Well, and try to explain to someone that doesn't play games like a game like Catherine, which is a puzzle game framed around, a tale about infidelity.
Oh, forget it. I would just go tell him to read a book.
Yeah. No, but there's this really cool part, like Demon Baby chases you, and it's like...
And you die like every 5 seconds. It's awesome.
Yep. Masa, what have you been playing? Maybe tell us a little bit about what's been in your consoles lately.
All right, so the reason why I wanted to set the time scope for for a couple of months is because I was like, yeah, maybe we should talk about the games we have been playing in December, but then I was like, wait, hold up, like I've only been playing Xenoblade Chronicles basically. So because like I gotta say, I'm a sucker for all these like long ass RPGs. And the problem is that like, okay, so I know that there are people out there who finish, like they beat like 50 games a year. I'm not one of those people. I'm lucky to beat like, let's say 15 games a year. But I did finish Xenoblade Chronicles 2, but before that, I actually, because I mean, we had like Super Mario Odyssey, which came out like late October. Of course, I played that for quite a bit, and much like Paul, I've also been playing Ys 8, but I've been playing it on the PS4. And the only reason why I actually like put it away was that they are actually like planning to fix the translation. So I was like, well, I'm only in like chapter 2, so I was like, yeah, I might as well wait until they fix everything and then get back to it. Also, I've been playing like I mentioned, Xenoblade Chronicles X, not X2. That's the big game for me. I actually, like, I'm really surprised because, I mean, my total playtime at the moment is like 100 and, maybe 6, 7 hours. And it took me 100 hours to beat the game, but I actually put those 100 hours into that game in only 3 weeks. So, I mean, I got like really, really into that game. I would say it's a flawed game. It's definitely not like it's not the next great RPG. It's not a masterpiece. It's still an amazing game, and I just couldn't like put it down once I started playing. It was like this. What I like about Xenoblade 2 compared to X on the Wii U is that it's much more story heavy. While X was all about like the exploration, and I just like really couldn't get into it. Like exploring for the sake of exploration. But like with Xenoblade 2, it's kind of like the best of both worlds. Like you have all these like really, really vast and gorgeous worlds, but then there's lots and lots of like story, cutscenes. I think there's like a total of like 13 hours of cutscenes, which is insane. Even if the game is very long, but still. So I mean that just kept me going because I was like I was just like dying to know what happens next in the story, which is why like I skipped like most of the side quests. But yeah, I will probably like talk about that game, later. But yeah, like I usually like when I finish a long game, I'm like, yeah, you kind of like wanna do like a short game after that. But I actually got into Final Fantasy 15. But at least, like Arnie mentioned, it's short for an RPG. So that was kind
Final
of like
Fantasy 15. Sorry to interrupt you, but like Final Fantasy 15, I played it earlier this year. I don't think you guys, unless you really lean into the side quests, you won't spend more than 40 hours on it. I don't think it's as far as JRPGs go, it's basically bite sized, and that and is better for it.
Well, that's good to hear because I think I'm at that point now where I can handle like maybe 200-hour games like a year.
That seems fairly reasonable.
Yeah.
I don't even think I can do that, honestly. I mean, the last 200-hour game that I did was The Witcher 3, and now I'm just craving whatever short game comes my way. And so, just to segue into what I've been playing recently, that's what I try to do. We are recording this near the end of the year, so Christmas has just passed, and so we had a little bit of time off. And over the last week, I try to catch up on a lot of my backlog and try to cleanse out some of the games that had been eluding me throughout the year. And so I recently finished Wolfenstein: The New Order, which came out back in 2014, and I had heard great things about, but had never gotten around to playing it. But I knew that it was about 10 to 12 hours long, so I definitely said, let's try it. Let's do this. And was very pleasantly surprised that it was a very excellent game. It's very well told, very nuanced, and even though you're killing Nazis and sometimes in very brutal ways, the frame of it and the way that it's told. It's not that the storyline is original, but the way it's told is very well done, and the characters are actually well, explained and developed. And so it really got me into it, to the point that I really want to go on to the next one, which came out this year, which is the new Colossus. So I'm probably going to hold off on playing that one until, some time passes between one and the other. But I was very pleasantly surprised to, really enjoy that. Besides that, I also finished the latest Uncharted, The Lost Legacy. And I think, like many people, I'm just kind of getting burnt out on, the kind of cover shooter, third person mechanics. I was burned out on it back when Gears of War came out. And, this is just kind of, continuation of that. And I always liked Uncharted because there was a lot of, banter between the characters, and it had a very lighthearted mood. And I just really like the narratives behind it. And I like the characters that, I played with. But that's been running out of steam little by little. And so, I can't say I didn't like it. I mean, I liked it just enough, but It was definitely one of those games where you finish more of a sense of obligation rather than because you really enjoyed it. And before that, I was playing Dark Souls 3
because you hate
as a
yourself.
gamer, because I hate myself. I mean, I like like hitting my head against the wall. But it's more of an ego thing, really. I mean, I played Dark Souls because I wanted to prove to myself that I could beat it. I wanted to have that kind of credential in my gaming resume. It's like I beat a Dark Souls game. And so I started playing it, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, I really thought it was a very well made game. But after playing it for 15 hours and realizing that I was just maybe like 12% of the way into the game, I said, I really had to stop this and just play something else for a little bit, because it's a feeling of dread that every Dark Souls player knows. And for those of you that don't know, Dark Souls is a very distinctive franchise in which you get killed over and over again, and until it forces you to get better. And it's a very difficult game, and so kind of gamers see it as a badge of honor to have finished this game. I realized after playing it for about 4 weeks that I just needed a change of pace. I needed something else. And so that's when I started playing all these other games. But that's basically, what I've been playing, popping in things here and there from my collection just to see how they are. But the backlog is real. The backlog is huge. I still have a lot of games that I wish I could play. But it's the eternal enemy of us collectors is time. You never have enough of it. And so I look forward to playing many other games in this coming year.
But yeah, I mean, I know the feeling. Because like I've been like getting like I just realized like yesterday I picked up Okami HD. I was like, yes, now I have almost every like PS4 game that I've been wanting to get. Because I mean, I picked up maybe like 8-9 games during this past month, and I'm like, yeah, I have all these games. But then it hit me that. But when will I actually have time to play all these games? Like, yeah, sure, I just finished Xenoblade. Now I'm, playing Final Fantasy, but like, when will I actually play Okami and Gravity Rush 2 and, Yakuza and like all these other games? I'm like, oh my god, I'm not gonna have time for these games that I actually, really, really wanna play. And it's honestly a very horrible feeling.
It's I try to rationalize it or make myself feel better just by I don't mind the owning of the games. That's fine. If I have more than I'll ever play, I'm not too fussed about it. I like having the option. I like being able to look at my shelf and say, all right, today I feel like playing Gravity Rush 2. And that's to me a better feeling than looking at my shelf and being like, fuck, I wish I had that game and not having it. So, I'm not going to necessarily spend all my money and buy everything. I've only bought, I don't know, 4 Switch games over the past year, just the stuff that I really wanted to play. But with that said, it's nice to have the choice rather than not have the choice. I mean, going back to when I was a kid, and especially in the 16-bit era, man, that 16-bit era when we were just dying for RPGs and very few were getting localized. Now it's like a freaking cornucopia of games. I won't forget what it was like back then to be just completely starved. So, yeah, I'd rather just have the choice than not.
Yeah, I mean, back in the days, like, I mean, I never actually, like, as a kid, I never actually owned, like, that many games. Like, well, okay, so I was lucky enough to have, like, this, like, pirate cartridge for the NES that had, like, one of these, like, 501 games. Which actually, like, it didn't actually, like, have 500 games. It was more like, yes, Contra, and then it had, like, Contra 1, like, times 15, starting like, from different levels and with, like, different weapons. But still, like, I mean, that's how I, got to play a lot of, like, different NES games. And then, of course, like, my parents would, like, rent games all the time. So they actually, like, wouldn't have to buy me games. Like, I don't think I ever owned, like, more than, like 10 NES games, and it was for the Super Nintendo I had a bit more, but like I never had a big collection because yeah, I mean, first of all, like I wouldn't really get that many games because my parents would only give me a game for my birthday or Christmas or whatever, and then we would just rent or I would borrow games. So yeah, so I mean, of course, nowadays it is nice to have like that choice that you can, if I feel like playing, Mario Odyssey today, yeah, I can play it, and then once you kind of like realize that you don't have to finish every game that you own, that's kind of like it's a bit of a relief. Like you can just, especially like nowadays when free time is like really precious and stuff. It's like just if you feel like playing a game for just 5 hours, then just do it, and then you can move on to another game. But then, I mean, of course, sometimes you have those games that you just feel like you have to finish, and you really get into them. But not every game has to be like that.
Yeah. I completely agree. Like Paul said, I mean, it really is just about, for me at least, it's about being able to be in my house and just be like, I feel like playing this game today, and I have it, and I could just sit down and play it as much or as little as I want. So it's really just about the choice. And like, I agree with both of you. Like growing up, there wasn't, you didn't have the option of owning this many video games. So it was a lot of borrowing, a lot of trading, a lot of renting. I mean, I must have rented Marvel vs. Capcom 2 like 15 times over my lifetime. I don't know how much money Blockbuster must have made off of me just renting video games every single weekend.
Dude. Yeah, it's like you're that guy that came into the store. It's like, yeah, we have it.
Absolutely.
We're holding it for you. So Masa, should we go into the games of the years or?
Yeah, I think it's time. It's finally time to talk about the games of the year, and I think this will be quite interesting since 2017 has been, like, without a doubt, one of the greatest years in gaming of all time. Like, it's been amazing. Like, I've been doing like this, like top 10 games of the year countdown on Instagram, and okay, so I have only made it to game number 8, but like I was comparing like my top 10s from like this year and 2016, and oh my god, it's like night and day. I mean, of course we had some good games last year, but a lot of those games, like especially like looking back, it was like, yeah, I mean they were good games, but they, 5-10 years from now, I mean they won't really be remembered. While the best games of 2017, like we have gotten, like of course it's early to say whether they are like all-time classics, but I feel like the best games of 2017 that they will, stand the test of time, and we will be talking about these games, in 10, 15 years still.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
I definitely think so. Yeah. So Masa, what's your game of the year?
Okay, so
for Instagram countdown.
No, it's fine, because I mean I have mentioned this so many times, and first of all I'm gonna say that it is not only my game of the year, but I mean this is a very bold claim, because I mean I've been playing video games for 27 years. I've played like, I don't know, hundreds of games, and there's been like so many amazing games, but I would have to say, okay, so it's not my favorite game of all time. Like, there's a difference between like the best game and like your, personal favorite. But Breath of the Wild is the best video game I have ever played, and it's my game of the year.
Yes, exactly. It's Zelda Breath of the Wild. It's hard. It's really hard to disagree with that, with the fact that it's game of the year, best game of all time. I mean, I don't know, man. I'd have to think about that pretty hard.
Well, I think Zelda. It's a franchise that has been around since 1986. It's so well known, even to non-gamers. They know what Zelda is about, and it's kind of followed this template for so long, going back to the Nintendo, but more recently with Ocarina of Time on the Nintendo 64. It really followed a template that was very well known to Zelda players. You go to a dungeon, you acquire a certain weapon or tool, and you use that, for the next dungeon and the like. And, Breath of the Wild just kind of throws all of that away. It really just starts from scratch. It scraps everything that you knew about Zelda and tosses you out into this massive fantasy world that you're forced to kind of come to terms with and to discover little by little. And I really think that's what makes the game so special. It's that sense of discovery, that you're always kind of running into things that you're not necessarily expecting. And you're always wondering what's next over that mountain. And I think the very best games do that. I can think of a few games that have done that, but not as well as Zelda has done it with Breath of the Wild, because it really just takes away all the assists that players are accustomed to, such as a mini map and the like that tells you where everything is and where to go. You kind of are just forced to, figure out yourself, where are you going to go? What are you going to do? How are you going to get there? Because of their night cycle, are you going to travel now? Are you going to camp out so that you can travel during the day so that you don't have undead creatures coming out at night, and possibly killing you. It's very much a game that really puts a sense of adventure into game playing again. And I really think that that's not something that many games in the past, if at all, have really done. And from what I've heard, it's really what they wanted to achieve. That initial feeling that you got in 1986 when the first Zelda came out, of just being in a strange land and just figuring out where to go. And I think they really achieved that.
I think they did too. They really hit the nail on the head with it. Look, the bottom line is that, you're going back to the original Zelda. You were talking about that, and you're going back to the 8-bit era and so on and so forth. Everything back then was new. Like, it wasn't, I'm not going to say it wasn't hard to innovate, just that there was an expectation of innovation because there was so little out there genre-wise and style-wise. Nowadays, everything, all these genres, everything is refined. There's very few games these days that are just completely new. Portal, for example, would have been the last one that I can remember that just blew me away as being something completely new and updated. So for a game like Breath of the Wild to come out now in 2017 and set itself apart so thoroughly and completely and recapture the sense of wonder and really, it sounds cheesy, but joy of playing games. It's a feat, man. Like, it's not like 30 years ago where this kind of stuff was expected to happen because everything was new.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that game is like all about your like childlike curiosity, because like nowadays we are like spoiled with these open world games where, you take over a tower and then this mini map opens and there's like all these like question marks and all these like points of interest, and you are like, whoa, so many side quests, but and that's like guiding you. But in Zelda, it's like your own curiosity. It's like, yeah, you just want to know what's like over the mountain. You want to know what that, huge dragon is.
Yes.
And that's like what's guiding you, not these like random points on the map.
Or or missions or whatever.
Yeah,
Sorry,
exactly.
Arnie, I interrupted you.
No, that's fine. I was just gonna say that, I haven't played Breath of the Wild, but even just from seeing
Oh my god.
Collective gasp.
Yeah.
Arnie, you've been cast out of the podcast.
Yeah.
I was gonna say Mike gets cut, I've been kicked out. But I was gonna say that even just from watching other people play and hearing people talk about it, it seems like the biggest thing that I think Nintendo did was make a game where each person's sort of journey through it is completely unique. And I think that's very, very innovative, especially for a game franchise like Zelda, where the formula had sort of been perfected over the years. And they were so willing to sort of set that aside and just create a game where, you can literally go through it any way that you want. There is no set path. There is no scripted sort of narrative that you need to follow. It'll all lead to the same end goal, but the way you get there is completely up to you.
Yes, 100%.
And I agree with that, Arnie. The only thing is, I recently started playing it again on the Switch. So at first, because I didn't have a Nintendo Switch, I started playing it on the Wii U. And I played it for maybe 25 hours. Then I stopped playing it for some time. And recently I picked it back up on the Switch and I restarted again. And one of the things that struck me is that, yes, you pretty much have the freedom of doing whatever you want. but the game is actually very well structured. It's just that structure is very, very invisible. You don't really see it, but the game does a very good job of steering you towards certain paths that will teach you the mechanics of the game and the tools of the game. And then after a certain point, it just kind of opens up completely wide open, and you can go any which way. But after replaying it again and going through a lot of similar steps, I realized, wow, I mean, they're just very subtly guiding me towards this route, even though, it feels like I am blazing my own path. And so that's where it kind of keeps the structure. But, like the very best games, it never shows you what it's doing. It never tells you, you have to do this because it's a tutorial and you need to learn how to use this tool. And I think that's very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly feel like that's like the next level of like, game design. And I know this sounds a bit wild, but like many times.
Like a Breath of the Wild?
Yeah, like many times when I was playing Breath of the Wild, I was like, yeah. Many times when I was playing the game, I was like, oh my god.
The level of quality.
Yeah. But yeah, I was like, I can't believe that this world is actually man-made because it feels so alive, so real, and it's just like so fascinating and mysterious. So it's like, yeah, like how can this be actually like be an like artificially made game world? It's just so fascinating.
And the other thing that helps with that is the way Link interacts with the world. All the objects, all the walls, the ground, even the grass, the way Link interacts with everything just gives it a physicality that other games just haven't been able to touch, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I can pick up a gun in GTA, and that's all well and good, but the fact that you can cut the grass with your weapon, set the grass on fire. I know that sounds boring. Cutting grass is something that I do on Saturday mornings, but it really is special. And I've mentioned this to you guys on Instagram, ad nauseum now, but I swear the first time I saw Link climb a wall, as something as simple as climbing a freaking wall, I was blown away, because once you climb that wall and you reach a ledge for the first time, and then you look around and you see all these other vertical surfaces far, far away, it's like, holy shit, this is incredible. I can climb everything. I can explore everything. And then you throw the glider in there, and it's like, geez, the game would have been amazing even without the glider. But then you throw the glider in there, and suddenly you have this interplay between the stamina wheel, you're climbing and gliding in order to reach certain spots and find out the best way to get to certain spots. And there's never one way to achieve something. There's multiple ways that you can achieve things in this game. It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, that's
kind
like
of breaks that invisible.
Like that's one of the.
It kind of breaks that invisible wall that is in games a lot of the times. I mean, if you recall a game like Skyrim, it doesn't have as many walls, but we have all seen, videos of, scaling down the side of a mountain, where your character is barely touching the mountain and you're just kind of like trying to break the game. Whereas Zelda, it makes that part of the game. It's a feature of the game that you can climb everything. And it just breaks down that boundary, in games. It breaks down that wall that we are kind of accustomed to.
I never feel like I'm getting away with something when I'm playing Breath of the Wild. I never feel like I'm breaking it. Everything I achieve in that game, I feel like I've earned. And that's the way it was designed.
Yeah, exactly. And I gotta say about the whole, like, the travel mechanics in that game, it's like, I mean, of course you can get horses in that game, and it's awesome, but I have played the game for around like 180 hours, and I have, like, honestly, I have barely used horses because I enjoy the whole climbing and, gliding mechanic like so much that I like, that's like my, like preferred method of traveling. It's like, I just climb a mountain and then I just fly. Like, Absolutely. It's just so much fun. And actually, like, at the same time, like, and I don't want to put this game down in any way because it's, again, one of the best games of the year, Nier. But like, I was playing that kind of like at the same, or at least like around the same time as Zelda, and it's an excellent game. But like, when I was playing that game, I was like, man, I really wish that I could climb all these, like, like these buildings, and well, you can sort of like glide in that game, but like, I was really hoping that that game would have like had some of the gameplay mechanics And I feel like the world, because the world in Nier is a bit dull compared to Breath of the Wild. But then again, you can say that about like any game compared to Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I also feel like one of the things that the game does very well, it's the sense of adventure, but not only the sense of adventure, but the sense of silence and solitude in adventure. That every journey is kind of quiet and being on your own, and the game is not afraid, to let you be on your own and let you just soak in the silence and just listen to nature and listen to what's going on. Because if you were on an adventure, that would probably be what it would sound like. It wouldn't necessarily be a soaring, soundtrack, playing while you're climbing mountains, and it makes you feel very lonely at times. And every journey from point A to point B feels like it has to be undertaken with some planning involved, and you have to know where to stop. You have to know, which path you're going to traverse. And, the game is not throwing like, Tingle, into the game so that you can have a companion, or, it doesn't really fear leaving you on your own. And because of that, the game has a sort of melancholic, ambience to it throughout, where you're constantly kind of on your own. And whenever you get to a stable and you hear music in the stable and you start seeing a few people, it's kind of a relief. You feel like you came from the wild, you came from nature, and now you're back in, with people, and you know that you're going to leave again until the next time you run into those people again. And that's feeling, I don't think that I've ever had any other game kind of capture that feeling.
You know what, actually, like that reminds me of Super Metroid, especially like that feeling of like solitude and loneliness, and that like really ambient music. Because, I mean, Super Metroid is like one of those games where, I mean, you really feel like you are alone in this world. And Breath of the Wild has this same, feeling to it. And yeah, and what makes it even more interesting is that like this world is basically like a, post-apocalyptic world, that everything is in ruins. And then when you actually like meet people and like, basically like you had like this, like Calamity Cannon and everything was like destroyed, but you still have like, life, kind of went on after that. And you are still like seeing, like you do have like villages and you do have like these tables and you meet people, but it's still like this very like barren kind of like wasteland and full of monsters and stuff. So it's a very like, yeah, I mean, it's definitely like a melancholy experience, but it's also like very beautiful, like the, the quietness and kind of like this, post-apocalyptic world where everything is, the beautiful land of Hyrule, was completely like destroyed.
Yep, and it's the most delightful post-apocalyptic world that I have seen, at least.
Yeah.
You don't have like, Mad Max type of, aesthetics. It's still very much a Zelda game, but it's good to know that it's kind of a post-apocalyptic. So Arnie, I think you were trying to say something. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I just had one question for you guys, since you guys have played the game, and obviously, it's clear that it's a very good game, it's a great game, and this is not to take anything away from that, but I did want to ask you guys, since you've played it and you sort of know the ins and outs of it, do you think that there's any benefit that this game gets in terms of how much it's beloved because it's Zelda, because it's set in this world and it's based on these characters? If we saw a game that had these sort of same mechanics and sort of features, but was set in a world that wasn't as well known as this, would it have gotten the same sort of praise?
Not immediately, but it would have eventually. The game's too good. If it was The Legend of Arnie, Breath of the Wild, and it had come out in March, I feel like it probably would have spread just through word of mouth and good reviews at the beginning. We see games like that over the years quite a bit, games that just kind of come out of nowhere and people are reviewing them and they're like, my God, this is incredible. And it would have been the same thing. Putting the Zelda name on it, I mean, you do that to sell the Switch, but beyond that, the game is just fantastic. It doesn't need the license, but it certainly benefits from it.
And someone made a very good point about it, because of course Breath of the Wild topped all these like Game of the Year lists. I'd say media darling, and a lot of fans, are just as head over heels for it as we are. But the thing is that there's a lot of Zelda fans who were actually disappointed, and like someone said that, for example, like Breath of the Wild is a better game than Mario Odyssey, but overall Mario Odyssey is a better Mario game than Breath of the Wild is a Zelda game.
I'm rolling my eyes right now, but please continue.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of like Zelda fans who actually like, because it's very different compared to like, let's say, Twilight Princess, The Wind Waker, and I mean, I would say that Breath of the Wild is like I would say that before Breath of the Wild, there were only two true benchmark Zelda games. We have had many great Zelda games. For example, A Link to the Past, Wind Waker, like all these games are amazing. But I would say the only like true benchmark games, like the true like groundbreaking games, were the first one on the NES, and then of course Ocarina of Time. And I would say Breath of the Wild is now like the next evolution. Like that's finally like a new Zelda game that is not based on, well, it's sort of based on the first game, but it has like almost nothing to do with like Ocarina of Time. So in that regard, I would say it's so different compared to the recent Zelda games that I think it would have done well even if it wasn't called, Zelda.
Yeah, and Arnie, I mean, to answer your question, I think the wonderful thing about the game, it's not necessarily the Zelda name. It's really the systems that the developers have created. Like Paul mentioned, everything in the world has a cause and reaction. So if you feel like you can do something in the real world, you probably will be able to do it in Zelda. Like I remember I was climbing in a very snowy region, and I had a bunch of goblins, in a campfire, and I had a bow, and there was kind of an explosive barrel, and I said, well, I don't have fire, but I saw that there was a campfire, and I said, well, I don't have fire arrows. I said, well, what if I put my arrow in the fire? And I did that, and the arrow, lo and behold, caught on fire. And it's things like that really stand it apart from every other game out there. And it's really the systems. You can, make wind with a leaf and then sail away on your glider. Like it actually makes the glider rise up. It's all the systems and how they interact with each other that really make the game great. So I think regardless of whether it was Zelda or not, I think that would have come through.
And just one more thing before we just turn this into a Zelda podcast. I have one more point and then we should probably move on. The Guardians in Zelda, probably the most terrifying enemies I've had in any game that I can remember for a very long time. The fact that they don't necessarily throw the Guardians at you immediately, but the ability to encounter a Guardian almost right at the beginning of the game and have really no choice but to run is fantastic.
Yeah,
it really... Yeah. It makes it so much more satisfying later on in the game when you finally beat one. And it's almost never worth, at least in my experience, it was almost never worth it to beat one. It takes up so many weapons and so on and so forth, but they're just incredible enemies. Like when the music hits, you get that chill and it's like, run, fucking run.
Yeah, like your heart sinks.
Yeah.
Immediately your heart sinks and you're like, okay, well, I have to figure something out.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's the only thing you can do is run. The only thing you can do is run, and that's a very bold move. I mean, I know, some players are able to beat them, but really for most players, the only option is to run.
Yeah.
So. But I would say, like, Breath of the Wild has, like, it's not only the Guardians, because, I mean, the Guardians are my, like, new favorite Zelda enemies, but you also have the Lionels. And that's another, like, I remember my first encounter with a Lionel. I was on top of that one mountain, and I saw this like Lionel. I was like, yeah, what is this? Like, I've never seen an enemy like that before. And it didn't even react at first. It was just like staring at me and waiting for me to do something. I was like, okay, so what is going on? And then when I, got closer, because I mean, I was still like on a higher ground, instead of like the Lionel didn't like, attack me with its like melee weapon. Instead, it like took his like bow and started shooting like these electric arrows at me, and I was like, what the fuck? And then I mean, I don't know, it like 10 seconds later it was game over, and I was like, what just happened? And then later on in the game, like I encountered another Lionel, like across a bridge, and we were just like staring at each other from the distance, and I was like, yeah, I mean, I don't wanna, like make that guy angry again. And then I was like, well, maybe I should just climb that mountain and go the other way. So yeah, see you later. But then, I mean, of course, later on in the game, when you actually like get more power ups, and then once you actually like know how to play the game and learn the battle system a bit better, then it's like those Lionel fights and also the Guardian fights, they are like so satisfying. Like when you actually like finally beat them.
Never easy. They're never easy.
Yeah, no.
Even when you get stronger, it's still a skill testing encounter, and it's always satisfying as a result. It's not like other games where you level up infinitely and then eventually you can swat the enemies like flies. No, it's never as difficult as it is the first couple of times, but it's also never easy. Very satisfying.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. Always like that moment, like you might miss your timing, and then all of a sudden like everything goes to hell.
Yep. Masa, Breath of the Wild's your game of the year. Just to keep it short, it's my game of the year, and it's not even really that close. Ozzy, is it for you too?
No, it's up there. It's really up there, but it really, was overshadowed a little bit by Mario Odyssey. And, like Masa has mentioned in the past, how we have two of the, I would say, greatest Nintendo games ever just come out this year. It's really kind of a spoil of riches. And I really didn't expect Mario Odyssey to be my favorite game of the year, to be honest. I really haven't been crazy about a Mario game for many, many years. I would say probably as far back as Super Mario World. And I think what really changed for me with this game is that I feel like Nintendo for a long time has kind of really stuck, with what it's comfortable with, and really, with respect to Mario, kind of played it safe and used the same enemies and, made excellent, well-designed levels. But, the frame around that level has not necessarily been original. It's been a lot of the same things being rehashed over and over and over again. And even games as inventive as Mario Galaxy, even though you're traveling to different planets and the like, it still didn't feel that different. It still felt like a lot of it were things that you have seen before. And I feel like that really was thrown out the window with Mario Odyssey. Much like Zelda, this is a Nintendo that really wasn't afraid to just completely throw away all the old ideas and start with something new. And it just brought back the same sense of wonder and the same sense of just curiosity that I had playing Super Mario World. And I think it was that feeling of being a kid again, even though I'm a 28-year-old man, that really made me feel like this is something special. And if we're really going to talk about what makes it special, it's one, the idea that like Super Mario Brothers 3, you're traveling to different worlds and you don't know what the next world will hold. Maybe the next world is prehistoric, land with dinosaurs and the like, or maybe it's a world made entirely of food, where their main export is, culinary delicacies. It's just completely bonkers, in the way that it presents new ideas. And it creates so many new characters within the Mario world, which is something that I really missed. I wanted to see new creative inventiveness, Mario mythology being expanded. And I really like that they did that. They presented a whole new environment for you to kind of just run wild in. And perhaps the thing that makes it, this would all be well and good, but if the gameplay wasn't great, I don't think it would hold any water. And yes, the gameplay is extremely well designed. It's extremely tight. The platforming is, kind of perfect. But really what makes it stand out is the, mechanic of inhabiting other characters. And the thing is, every character you inhabit has a different play style. And every character you inhabit, you have to learn to play with that character. And the levels all kind of transform themselves around that character. And there are, I think, about 50 different characters that you can inhabit. And the idea of you don't know what may be next, it may be a frog, it may be a caterpillar, it may be a dinosaur, whoever, you can inhabit, you don't really know. And, no spoilers, but, at the end you inhabit, characters that you never expected you could inhabit. And so it just makes it just constantly feel different and fresh. And I just never got tired of it. And right now at this point, I'm still missing a bunch of moons, which are the primary collectible in the game. And I'm looking forward to going back to it at some point again and just kind of, cleaning out the things that I missed, because there's just so much, that they have on offer there. So, yeah, I think that's a reason why it's my game of the year. It just made me feel like a kid again, and I haven't felt that with a Mario game in a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, that's the perfect way to describe the game. It also, at one point, when I was playing the game, I think it was I was in New Donk City, and then my girlfriend asked me because I mean she saw me play Breath of the Wild and how much I loved that game, and she was watching me play Odyssey, and she was like, "So yeah, Masa, which game do you like more?" And for a moment there, I was like, "Man, that's actually a difficult question." Well, I mean, of course, now that I'm basically done with both games, of course, I do prefer Breath of the Wild, but that's mainly because I feel like that game is more revolutionary and groundbreaking, while Mario is. I mean, I kind of feel like it's the next level of Mario games, but I don't think it's gonna be. When it comes to the let's say platformers in general, it's not gonna be a groundbreaking game. But still, I really love that game to death, and it. The highs of Mario Odyssey are so amazing. It has, even if overall Breath of the Wild is my game of the year, but I would say my favorite moments were actually in Odyssey. Especially, it feels weird. Especially I'm someone who loves RPGs, and RPGs are always known for epic stories, great endings. But still, I would say that out of all the games I have played this year, Mario Odyssey has my favorite ending sequence. It's so unexpected, and yeah, I don't know, it really was so surprising, and yeah, it was even a bit touching. It was funny, and you never really expected that out of a Mario game. And another big highlight was New Donk City, because I know, myself included, but a lot of people, when they showed us footage of New Donk City, and it's wait, there's Mario, there's that's New York, and there's real people, what the fuck is this? But then at the end, we actually got at least in my humble opinion, we got the greatest platforming game stage of all time. That stage is just pure platforming perfection. And that one moment, I don't want to spoil it, but there's this one amazing moment that almost made me cry. It was so amazing. And
well,
one last thing, I have to say one last thing. I feel sorry for Odyssey that it had to come out this year, because it truly is deserving to be called Game of the Year. But it's just that Breath of the Wild is Breath of the Wild, so yeah.
I bought Odyssey, but I've only played it for about half an hour. Just haven't. I mean, it's a little bit ridiculous that I'm choosing to play a 16-year-old or a 16-bit rather strategy RPG over something like Odyssey, but here we are. I think I'll get to it eventually myself. Arnie, I'm assuming you haven't played Odyssey. What would be your game of the year?
Well, if you've been paying attention, Paul, you would know that my game of the year is obviously Persona 5. Hit Me in the Streets, best game of the year. But no, it really is Persona 5, and the reason that it's Persona 5, I really like the game. It's a good game, but I think the reason that it was my favorite game of the year is because it gave me everything that I wanted, and then it gave me a little bit more that I didn't even know I want. It kept what I liked and improved on it, and it also gave me some new stuff that I really enjoyed. You know, and I know you've played through it, and Masa's also played through it, so I'd love to get your guys' opinion on it. But I mean, I think that this has to be one of the best, RPGs in general that I've ever played. Despite it being over 120 hours for me to beat, at the end of it, I still wanted more, which is very rare for me nowadays. Like when I play a game that's this long, it's usually a relief when I'm done with it. But with this one, I was really tempted to just jump right back in, New Game Plus, and just keep going, because it's, everything from the world to the characters to the music is just great. I enjoyed it so much.
Well, yeah, that's like what I wanted to ask you guys. Like, well, first of all, like, well, okay, so obviously, like, Persona 5 is Arnie's game of the year. It's my, it's in my top 3, definitely. Maybe even in my top 2. But like what I wanted to know is that how high would you guys like rank it, like when it comes to, 2017 games, but also when it comes to the all-time best RPGs? Like, would it make your top 10? And where would it like actually land in that top 10?
For me, if just off the top of my head, because that's a pretty loaded question, but I would probably say somewhere in the 5 to 7 range for me. I mean, there are other all-timers, like you have your Final Fantasy VII, and you have your Persona 4. I preferred over it, even though Persona 5 was the more technically proficient game. It's still like, the thing about Persona 5 is that it's superlative in so many different ways, and the only weakness is that there's too much of it, which is kind of silly. If I went back to when I was like 14 years old and you told me that a game like Persona 5 existed that was super long and had a New Game Plus mode, and back then I could only own like 3 games per year, hell yeah, sign me up for this super, super long game. Nowadays, it's a little bit of a weakness, but otherwise, I mean, the game just hits everything almost perfectly. Like the graphics, the art style, are you kidding me? Like it's unbelievable. The soundtrack, fantastic. Not only is the soundtrack great, it's integrated into the game beautifully. Like every level, the soundtrack is appropriate. All the transitions are appropriate. All the music makes sense. As far as JRPG, turn-based battling goes, I mean, Final Fantasy 15, for example, probably had more innovative combat, but what Persona 5 does is it takes a formula and it hones it. It's sharp. Mm-hmm. And it has, if you want turn-based combat, it has no weakness to it, really. All these, and then the storyline is like, I don't know, man. It's good. It's not like P4, but it's strong.
Yeah, absolutely.
I may be the only guy here that hasn't beaten it. And I just want to chime in that if there's one word that I could use to describe Persona 5 is elegant. Everything about the design is elegant. Everything about the way the game is made and it's presented to the player is just very stylish. And again, just elegant. The music has this funk type of Jamiroquai kind of quality that just feels very cool. There's just a cool feeling to the music. And I know we've talked about this, but the menus, man, I mean, my favorite menus in all of gaming, I think, are the ones in Persona 5.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think there have been any other menus that have been that crazy, and well designed. I think elegance is really what I feel about Persona. So Masa, please let us know.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's like what Paul mentioned earlier, that nowadays, like, okay, so yeah, it's cool that we have all these 4K games nowadays, like Horizon Zero Dawn, like these games look amazing, but still, like nowadays, I feel like it's more about like art style like I prefer games with like, you know, unique and beautiful art style over, you know, like super hyper realistic graphics. And that's what, like, for example, you have Final Fantasy 15, which is it's a gorgeous game, and like some of these characters, they look really realistic. But I mean, I would take Persona 5, which is basically a PS3 game. I would take P5 over Final Fantasy 15 any day when it comes to the graphics and the overall style.
I mean, think about what Ozzy said for a moment. He used the words, my favorite menu. What other game makes you say, my favorite menu? That's not a thing. But Persona 5 makes it a thing because the menu is just so fucking cool. Every time I hit triangle and that menu came up, it was a delight.
Yeah, because I mean, and that's actually important. It's like one of the most underrated things about like RPGs because, I mean, when you have an RPG, like let's face it, like most of the time, like you will like spend a lot of time in the menus, like Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I mean, I have like 100 hours of gameplay, and I bet that there's at least like 10 hours of me just like going through all the different menus. And I mean, in most games, it's like the menus, they are just there, and they are sometimes, they are useful, but like most of the time, they don't really use styles, and you don't like, in Persona 5, it's kind of a joy to just, open up that menu and, check out things. While in most games, it's like, oh my god, I gotta go through that menu again. God damn it.
Yep.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, in terms of the elegance, it's a lot also about the gameplay. Like even though it's a turn-based JRPG, they've done a few things to streamline it. For example, if the enemy has a weakness and you've already identified the weakness, you can just press a button and that's it. You launch the attack that the enemy is weak to, which is something that seems very minor, but that over the course of 100 hours, really makes a difference. And it's just that streamlining of design that even though Persona 4 is, more of a fan favorite because of its characters and the like, it really makes Persona 5 a more excellent and as a game experience more tightly designed than Persona 4.
Yeah, and it's really like when it comes to the dungeon design, I actually, while I was playing P5, I actually briefly went back to P4 Golden on the Vita, and I like those dungeons, those randomly generated dungeons. I just couldn't handle them anymore after like the actual like interactive dungeons in Persona 5. Like the difference is like night and day, and also like what Ozzy mentioned, that the whole thing about like that weakness system, like if you have like hit the enemy's weakness one time, I mean you don't have to like guess it again, because I mean that was like one of my biggest like pet peeves with like Persona 3. Like I would I mean of course you fight the same enemies over and over again, but like at first it's like, wait, what was that enemy's weakness? And then you're like checking out your notes or a card or whatever, but like it has, I mean, okay, so maybe some like old school fans are like, yeah, this is too easy, like this whole new like streamlined system, but it's like so, I feel like it's so modern and like player friendly in Persona 5, and that's why, I mean, when it comes to turn-based RPGs, that might actually be my favorite battle system, because it's just so, it's actually a joy to play, unlike many other like RPGs.
So let me ask you, Arnie, what do you think of the fact that the storyline was presented in a framed narrative? It's kind of told in flashback. Because that's one of the things that I wasn't really crazy about. But I wanted to get your guys' inputs on this because I really wasn't crazy about it, and I don't know why. I feel like it broke up the storyline too often, but I haven't completed the game, so I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so in terms of the storyline, I agree with you. I've never been a huge fan of storytelling in that manner, only because I feel like it creates this situation where I kind of know where the story is going before it's even gotten there. But in terms of the way the story was presented, I think that had it not been in flashback format, it probably would have been better. but I think the overall story and the characters, just the narrative that they created is so good that I was dying to just get, to the next thing every single time. I do think, because one of the things I realized that I don't really pay attention to a lot, but it happened here, and it's sort of like the thing you said about the menus. It's like a thing that you don't ever think about really, but this game just did it so well. Is when you start the game, like pretty much every RPG out there, you get a choice in what difficulty you want to play the game. And I played it in normal because that's usually how I play it. And once you sort of know how, Shin Megami Tensei games sort of work, it's not very challenging, but it was still so enjoyable because everything that's happening around the game mechanics, the characters, the story, the people that you meet and interact with are so interesting that I wasn't even bothered by the fact that, I didn't have a hard time beating this game. It wasn't particularly challenging to me. And I think that speaks a lot to the game itself, that even though the gameplay might not be, particularly challenging while you're playing it, there's so many things around you that you want to keep looking into that it's hard to stop playing the game.
And as far as the story goes, I'll chime in. I actually like what they did with it. As far as the flashbacks go, I like the fact that there's a certain point in the game you know what's going to happen. It sort of acts like a carrot dangling in front of you, where every time you progress through a dungeon in a certain part, it gets you closer and closer to that interrogation room and figuring out exactly what's going on. And in addition to that, and Ozzy, I know you haven't played through it completely. I think you said you finished the first dungeon, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so you'll probably never notice, but there are clues dropped through the game that have an impact later on. There are snippets of conversation where if you are a super alert Sherlock Holmes type person, you'll notice them and think to yourself, that's weird. I didn't notice, and I would guess that most people didn't. It's only later on in the game where you have these snippets of conversation that come back, and it's like, oh, wow, that's amazing. They drop these little things through there, and it's incredible. That doesn't have anything to do with the flashbacks necessarily, but the other thing that the flashback sequences provide is they also provide a clear cutting point. So everything post-interrogation, it's like an entirely different kind of story, where you have one half of the game where it's leading up to a certain point and you know where that point is. And then once you reach that point, it's open-ended and anything can happen. And it just provides a different feeling where, over the course of a 100+ hour game, it's kind of important to have that. I thought it was brilliant. Ordinarily, I don't like complexity for the sake of complexity, but if you're adding complexity and it's well executed, then congratulations, you've got Persona 5.
Yeah, it's like Paul said, once you get to the point where the flashbacks are originating from, you will probably never, like, the way you get there is still surprising. Like, it's not like what you think is going to happen is probably not going to happen.
You'll never see it coming.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you guys have sold me. So now I just got to find 90 more hours. So I'll get back to you next year.
But I would say, the whole premise is brilliant because, you start the game. Of course, you have, so many RPGs and video games in general that do the whole flashback thing. Like Final Fantasy 15, for example. That happens. But, the whole premise is excellent, and I don't really consider this a spoiler, but, you can't, you have this, escape scene, and then you actually get caught. And it's like, wait, what? And they even drop the whole thing that, there's a traitor. And, right off the bat, it makes the whole story, so much more interesting. Mm-hmm. And so, but, I do, I do understand that there's maybe a bit too much, of those, interrogation scenes. Especially, when you have those for every confidant, which aren't even, really story related. It's like, well, you had this person helping you out, and it's like, oh, yeah, here we go again. But, overall, I think it was, really well made. And much like Paul said, it's kind of like, yeah, you have that like one story arc, and then you have the climax, and then you have the post interrogation room thing, and that's like a whole nother like story arc.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I thought it was really well told, and when I got to the end of it, just like Arnie said, I have a rule generally. I don't play New Game Plus. It's a little bit too much for the amount of free time that I have, and I prefer playing a new game. Oh my God, it was really hard not to play New Game Plus on Persona 5.
Yeah, when
Yeah,
your fishing mini game is pretty engrossing, I think you've done something right.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, this is crazy. Like, I spent like 120 hours on P5, and I never even like I don't even know where you like have the fishing mini game.
Yeah.
I never
Yeah.
actually like found that place, and I mean I've never done that, and that was like one of the reasons why I kind of like wanted to go back. And I mean I did start the New Game Plus, but that was more for the confidence because I liked, or well, not even liked, but I loved most of them, and I felt like, yeah, I really need to max them out so I would get their own like little individual stories. But I mean, then it hit me that, well, I mean, I have hundreds of other games, so maybe I should play them before I, play Persona 5 again and spend, like another like 100 hours on it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame that, hey, what can you do, right? There's never enough free time.
Yeah, exactly.
You never see it coming.
Do you guys have any like disappointing games? Or I mean, of course, like we just talked about the whole fact that we don't really have that much time to enjoy all these games, and that's why like it was a bit difficult for me to actually like pick the worst game of the year. But like, do you guys have any games that you actually like really hated this year?
If I can start, I didn't have one that I hated. Like you said, I try not to spend my time playing games that I don't like. But I did have a disappointment, and as much as it pains me to say it, Metroid: Samus Returns was a pretty big disappointment for me. I've wanted a traditional Metroid game for years now, almost decades, and to get one and to not be completely crazy about it. I mean, it was a good game, but it was just not a game that really stuck with me. And to be perfectly honest, it was quite a slog to get through. The game gets very repetitive, and some of the game mechanics make it kind of very cumbersome to get through the game and break the pace of the game quite a bit. I think the biggest one is the parry system. You have to parry enemies in order to be able to kill them. Otherwise, they just become bullet sponges. And, that mechanic never really, becomes natural. And it always kind of breaks the game a little bit and breaks the pace. And I think that's something that Mercury Steam, which was the developer, they did the Castlevania Lords of Shadow game. And it's something they really like parries in their games. And the parry in this game was also something that they included. And I'm not a fan of it. And, it was really sad to see that at the end of it all, I was just not thrilled about the game. And also, at the end, there's kind of a twist that was really unnecessary. And it just kind of really, kind of left me just feeling wanting and just feeling disappointed. So yeah, that's unfortunately one of the games that, I really do hope they keep coming out with new Metroids. But I do hope that they come out with something innovative and new, and that they fix the errors and the design flaws of this game. So that's mine, at least.
All right. So what about Arnie?
I can't really think of a game that truly disappointed me this year. I've been getting a lot better at sort of, if I start playing a game and I'm just not feeling it for some reason or another, I just stop playing it. So there wasn't a game that I can think of off the top of my head right now that just really stood out as just not a very good game.
I can definitely think of a few that were disappointing or not very good. I'll name three because I don't want to go on all day here, but World of Final Fantasy I played earlier this year. played it for about 10 hours and just wasn't feeling it. It was not quite what I expected. A lot of micromanagement in that game, and it was just a little bit too much, which is a shame because it's pretty delightful. You know, it's got a good sense of humor. It's got a lot of callbacks to previous Final Fantasy games, but between the micromanagement and the weird combat, which I'm not going to get into, I don't have enough time, but that was a little bit disappointing. This is going to sound ridiculous, but Mighty Morphin Power Rangers for the PS4. I played that earlier this year. Yeah, I know, but bear with me for a second. I played it earlier this year for my old YouTube channel, and wow, that game was horrendous. Like we played it for my buddy Tyson and I played it for I don't know a couple of hours, and it took us 5 minutes to just want to gouge our eyes out. It was really unfortunate. But you know, good for comedy because it's always fun to see people play terrible games. And as far as the most disappointing game of the year for me, it was ARMS for the Switch. I remember seeing the previews for it and you know, it's not a bad game. It's just that I was so hyped for it. I remember seeing the previews and I saw what the style of the game looked like. And it looked like it looked like a modern Virtual On. And I've been waiting for a new Virtual On game for so long. I would love for another game in that style to be made. And so when ARMS came out, all I could think was, wow, this isn't Virtual On. And between that and the kind of loose controls, I wasn't really a fan. And I ended up bringing it back to the store.
I would say, well, okay, so I have one sort of a disappointing game, but it's definitely not a bad game, and it actually made it to my top 10. But yeah, Fire Emblem Echoes. Yeah, like you know me, like I'm a huge Fire Emblem fan. I never played the original one, and I mean, of course, we don't like. There's a fan translated version of that on the Famicom. Never played that, but I like when I started playing the remake, I had like very mixed feelings about it because it is actually when it comes to the presentation, it is the best Fire Emblem game ever because I mean it's fully voiced. There's like so many great things. You have like these 3D dungeons. There's a bit of dungeon crawling, which is really awesome. But then at the same time, like the level design, it's very retro, and I mean that in the worst possible way. Like a lot of those like levels, like everything outside of like the actual gameplay is amazing and very enjoyable. But then a lot of these levels are just like very tedious, and it's not even like challenging in a fun way. It's like let's say Fire Emblem Conquest is a very challenging game, but at least it's fun. But unfortunately, like Echoes had many stages that I don't know made me just like wanna stop playing the game. It just wasn't, you know, fun. But I mean, still, it's a good game. It's worth playing. But I must admit that I was a bit disappointed. But then, yeah, I do have a pick for the worst game of the year, and I never actually like really regret buying games, even if it's a game that I never end up playing. It's still like, well, that's a nice collectible. It might be a game that I want to play in the future, but yeah, it annoys me a bit because I even said this like publicly. I was like, 1-2 Switch, I will never buy that game, especially not for 50 euros. And then come March 3rd, the Switch launch day, I'm at the store and I'm like, you know, picking up my, you know, Breath of the Wild limited edition. It's like, yeah, 1-2 Switch, maybe I should get it after all. And I mean, I think I ended up playing it like maybe twice. And all these mini games, they're either like very forgettable or just downright bad. There's a couple of like sort of like enjoyable mini games, but there's just like no intensive like keep, you know, playing these games. It's not like, for example, for the Wii you had Wii Sports and, you know, bowling and all these games, they were fun, and you actually like let's say you might wanna, you know, beat your friends or, you know, get a new high score. But in 1-2 Switch, there's, I mean, like that aspect is like completely like lacking. It's like, well, I mean, you just play some of these games for the novelty, and you're like, whoa, HD Rumble, it's really cool. And then 5 minutes later, it's like, well, I don't ever want to play this game again. And
Yep.
I legit regret buying that game. It's, yeah, like one of my biggest gaming regrets, actually.
It should have been included with the system. That's
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not
it's a
worth
glorified tech demo.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Like
How
if
good
I
are you
they
at
did that with with Wii Sports, then why not with 1-2 Switch?
Yeah, 100%. I don't know. The thing is, it must have made them money, right? At the end of the day, because there were only 2 games available at launch, and 1-2 Switch is one of them. So people are going to buy it just because of a lack of options.
Yeah,
But with that said, I don't know, man. You got to include that game with the system. It's just if you're really excited about your Joy-Con technology, then you got to include something in the system that really shows it off. Wii Sports was so successful because it really used the Wii Remote in the way that they hoped it would be used. And on top of that, it was obviously a lot of fun. So if you want people to understand what the capabilities of your Joy-Cons are, then you got to include that game with the system.
yeah, exactly.
Masa, did you want to get into any kind of pleasant surprises for the year, or did you want to get into the gaming resolutions?
Yeah, pleasant surprises. I mean, we already talked about like Breath of the Wild, but I must say, and this probably sounds weird since I'm a Nintendo fanboy and a huge Zelda fan, but it was actually a pleasant surprise because to be honest, I was very worried about that game. Because first of all, Nintendo isn't really known for open world games, and like I remember like the like E3 2016 at first they showed that trailer and I was like, oh my god, that's the coolest thing ever. But then after a few hours of like just like normal gameplay footage, I was like, wait, is that all? Like, is that all you do in the game? And then it kind of like killed my expectations for a bit. But yeah, I mean, of course, it ended up blowing me away. So I would say that was it's a bit of a weird, pleasant surprise because, I mean, usually like this kind of game should be like something that you have a game that you expect it to suck and then it, blew you away. But yeah, I'm not sure. Like, I played a lot of games this year. Well, maybe I'm just gonna name drop my hidden gem game of the year, which is Tokyo Xanadu from Nihon Falcom. It really bothers me that game got like zero attention. I mean, it didn't help that it actually we got the PS Vita version first, and I mean PS Vita is as good as dead. So I mean, a grand total of like maybe 5 people played it. It just came out on the PS4, but the problem is that the release seems to be quite limited. And in Europe, most places still don't even have you can't even get a physical copy in Europe. I mean, there was like one random obscure online store that had some copies, but it's like you can't even, get the game physically. But yeah, I mean, I'm gonna talk about that game in a future episode, but just gonna say that it's like one of my favorite games of the year, and also, it's a must-own game if you like I would say Tokyo Xanadu is, if you put Persona, Trails of Cold Steel, and Ys in a blender, and I mean, the end result would be Tokyo Xanadu.
That sounds like a delicious shake to me.
Yeah, exactly. And
have you played the PS4 version, Masa?
Not yet, because I haven't been able to get it yet.
I wouldn't mind. I'm interested in it for all the reasons that you mentioned. I just don't know if I should get the Vita or the PS4 version. So I've been kind of waiting to see if anybody I know has played the PS4 version so I can make a more informed decision.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna, if I can't find the game locally, probably can't, I'm gonna import it in a couple of weeks maybe. And, I'm definitely gonna play it again. And also my girlfriend is interested in that game. So, I mean, she's planning to play it as well. I know that, for example, like Trails of Cold Steel, it doesn't really matter whether you played on the Vita or on the PS3, but with like East 8 and Tokyo Xanadu, like the PS4 versions it's like the definitive version, and they're like they are enhanced, they, have better frame rate, more content. So I would say and that game isn't like even like terribly long, so I think you should probably like get it for the PS4 instead of the Vita.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree just based on the limited knowledge that I have. Plus, I guess I've got a lot of games for every system. Who am I kidding? But it seems like the portable games just end up for me taking longer. It's more RPGs and stuff like that, and there's still other games in the backlog and plus the Switch now is portable, so that's a whole other, we don't necessarily have to buy games for the sake of them being portable and so on. Yeah, Ozzy, any surprises?
Well, I mean, as I mentioned, I think that Mario Odyssey being such a delightful game for me, really, surprised me because I was very much a skeptic. I was one of those guys that when I saw New Donk City, and it looked like, washed over Dreamcast, models, I was just like, what the hell are you doing, Nintendo? So I was definitely very much a skeptic. And it wasn't until very much, a few days before release that I started getting very hyped. And, it was only a few days before release that I actually even got a Switch, and it was only for Mario Odyssey. So, to be able to play it and actually feel so delighted by it, I really was not expecting that. So I would say that's probably my biggest surprise.
Yeah, Arnie, how about you?
So for me, it was more of a surprise because I hadn't played them yet, but I actually managed to get my hands on all the main Dragon Quest games for the DS, the remakes. And I had never played a Dragon Quest game to completion prior to this year. And as such a big RPG fan, I thought that was unacceptable. So I managed to beat two of them. I think it was 4 and 6, and I'm working my way through 5 now. And I was expecting it to be a little bit more of a slog, considering how generally old these games are, and I didn't know if the mechanics would have aged well, considering my like more modern taste for RPGs. But it was great. I really enjoyed playing through those games. So that was the biggest surprise for me this year.
Yeah, that sounds pretty fun. I would have expected it to be a slog too.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely not very refined. It's more so of grind up a few levels. If you're this many levels stronger than this character, you're going to win. But it was enjoyable. It wasn't the grinding wasn't too hard. Generally, if you just fought everything that you encountered on your way to wherever you were going, you'd be fine. And I think 6 is the one that introduces a job class system, which I really enjoyed messing around with. And it gave you a lot of options in how to build your party.
Yeah, not bad, man. As far as I'm concerned, surprising game of the year. It's not a new game, but when I played Persona 4 Dancing All Night earlier this year, I was expecting maybe a little whimsical thing that I play for an hour and then put down. Nah, man, that game's the real deal. It was shockingly good, like a rhythm game with a ridiculous story, but yeah, it was fantastic. Masa, you've played it before, right?
Yeah, it's excellent, and this is coming from someone who, in general, I'm not a big fan of rhythm games, and I think that might actually be the only rhythm game that I even own. And I mean, I was very even though I'm a huge Persona 4 fan, and I was like, well, I gotta get that game even if I'm probably not gonna enjoy it. But then, okay, so yeah, it does help a lot that the soundtrack is amazing. Like, I know that some fans were a bit lukewarm about the soundtrack containing mainly remixes, because they wanted to hear like the classic B4 tunes. But I mean, I was like, oh my god, like these remixes are really freaking good. And
well, yeah, and you have to have the remixes in there.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
not even you can have the originals, but frankly, the originals won't work as well in a rhythm game. You have to have that. You have to have that steady beat that you can hit the buttons to.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, like you mentioned, like the story is a bit ridiculous. But what I liked about it, like it actually kind of like gives you like a very nice like a closure for like the B4, like the cast of B4. Like it does have like those very classic like B4 moments. Like let's say outside of the main story, but like when these characters are together and they're interacting, like it really feels like it's not like Persona Q where I mean it feels like bad fanfic.
Yep.
But like here it really feels like Persona 4, and like the ending scene, it's amazing. It's like, well, we can finally say goodbye to these amazing characters. Because I mean, like I'm sure that most people like me, like after you finish Persona 4, you kind of want more, and you're like, oh my god, I'm just gonna miss these kids so much. But now, like I feel like after Dancing All Night, I'm like, yeah, I'm like kind of like ready to let go, and yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
no,
yeah,
hey man,
it's definitely yeah.
I agree.
Well, are you guys excited for the Persona 5 dance games and also Persona 3?
I will
3 and Persona
100% play the P5 dancing game. There's no
Yeah.
doubt about it. The
I
P4
mean, I
one
will
was
get
done
both.
so well, just so well. P5 is an auto purchase for me.
They both are. It's more about like, will I double dip? Like, will I actually like get the games both on PS4 and the Vita? Because that's what I've actually been wondering about is that because yeah, I mean, it felt really natural playing Dancing All Night on the Vita, and I'm a bit like, will it be the same on like if you have an actual controller and then you play it on TV? Like, will it actually feel the same? Will it be better or worse? So yeah, I'm not sure like what's gonna be like my preferred platform for those new dancing games.
The other thing about Persona 4 Dancing All Night, very underrated Ignore My Wife game, because I could be playing that game and I'll have headphones on, and if she talks to me, it's not like I can hit pause. It's a rhythm game, so she'll say something to me and I'll ignore her, and then she'll be like, "Oh, he's playing that game again," and then I'll hear about it later.
Like my that kind of game recently has been Xenoblade Chronicles 2, because I mean, yeah, like once you start a fight, you can't pause, and I've had many of those moments when my girlfriend is like, "Hey, Masa," and I'm like, no, I can't. Like, I just, I'm battling a boss. It's gonna like come back, in 15 minutes or so. Like, I just can't right now. Okay, so maybe we should move on to the last segment of the very first episode of our new podcast, which is New Year's gaming resolutions. Yeah, Ozzy, do you wanna start?
Beat Persona 5.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
At some point.
How about the list?
I think that has to be it. I think for next year, I just really need to beat Persona 5. And so that next year, when we are talking about, our games of the year, I can be like, well, there was Persona 5. So yeah, I think that's going to be my New Year's resolution. Actually, let me stretch that out into a more grander New Year's resolution. I want to beat a JRPG this year again. It's been a long time since I'd actually beat a JRPG. So might as well make it Persona 5. And I might as well throw in Persona 4 in there because I still have, a little bit to go in that game. So, yeah, beat a Persona game. That's my New Year's resolution.
Attaboy.
That's a good one.
Paul?
Well, in 2016, I had a gaming resolution, and that was to just stop playing games that weren't very good. Which, I was largely successful. Like I said, World of Final Fantasy, I was like, I'm going to cut bait on that one. For 2017, it's almost the opposite. I kind of want to go through some of the shorter adventure, like the really critically acclaimed stuff that involves decision making. Like I've got Firewatch. I haven't played that yet. Life is Strange. My wife and I, we started playing Until Dawn a couple months ago, and she's not a gamer by any stretch, but she likes Until Dawn because we just kind of sit there. I have the controller, and we make decisions for the characters. And so if I could get into something, like Life is Strange, for example, then that's another kind of game that we can play together. So yeah, something like, or even Journey or Abzu, those are all games that I'd really like to get into next year. And of course, it helps that they're not 100 hours, right? So it's not an unrealistic
yes, but
thing
Journey
that I
is
can
only
do
a
here.
couple of hours, and I think you will
Exactly.
really enjoy Life is Strange. That's actually okay. So I mean, I was only talking about like when it comes to the favorite games of 2017. I was only talking about games that were actually like released this year. But I actually in January I did play through Life is Strange, and I mean that would have made my list, and it's amazing. And I did just that like with my girlfriend. Like we would play together, and we would make these decisions together. And yeah, it was like one of the most amazing gaming moment, or well, yeah, gaming moments that I've had. And yeah, it's an amazing game and definitely worth checking out.
How about you, Arnie?
For me, it's probably gotta be play more modern games, like get more into my PS4, and those sorts of games. I am a extremely cheap bastard. So my sort of modern gaming sensibilities have not been fed very much, but I think now a lot of good games are coming down in price. I just picked up Yakuza Kiwami. So once I get through Final Fantasy 15, that'll probably be next on the chopping block. But it's really that. Hopefully I can get a Switch next year so I can be a cool kid. And get into Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey. So that's really going to be my focus this year is more modern stuff.
Yeah, Masa.
What about you, Masa?
Yeah, I guess it's my turn now. I would say it's opposite of like what Ozzy said about JRPGs. I'm like next year I want to play more of these like shorter games. Like I kind of regret like I mean I've been enjoying Final Fantasy 15, but like I've also got like Uncharted: The Lost Legacy just recently, and I know it's a short game, and it would have made sense for me to play that after a 100-hour Xenoblade. But somehow I just ended up with another JRPG. So next year I definitely wanna have like a bit more balance because I did play quite a few like very long games this year. So I'm hoping to maybe play at least a few more of these like 10-hour long games next year. And also it's actually like what I've been doing lately. Because nowadays, I mean, I have a fairly large collection of games, and I have like what I used to do, especially like when I was just like starting, to collect games, like I bought like kind of like way too many games, but it would be like instead of buying like one, like let's say a 60-euro game that I really want to play, I would rather buy 10 5-euro games. And I would maybe like play one of those, but it would still be like, yay, I got 10 games. But like nowadays, I'm mainly buying like new games, and it's just games that I really want to play, and then I often play them like right away. And I want to continue that, but also at the same time, it sounds a bit weird, but I kind of wish that 2018 won't be as good as 2017 because my backlog is still killing me, and there's like still, and I would like to, get back into like retro games again, because this year I simply, with all these like new amazing games, I barely played any old games. So that's why I kind of, especially like for this podcast and all, like I, wanna go back and play a bit more like Super Nintendo games and NES games and Mega Drive and all those. And by the way, it is Mega Drive and not Genesis.
Okay.
Hey man, the rest of the world agrees with you outside of North America. You're not exactly wrong.
But I think you're outnumbered here, Masa. We all grew up with the Genesis.
Yeah, I think that's all, folks. Yeah, it was really fun recording this first episode, and yeah, really looking forward to the future ones.
Absolutely.
And maybe we can say where you can find us on Instagram. just to, put a handle to our names. Again, my name is Ozzy. I go on Instagram where I kind of talk about my collection and my game experiences, and my handle is Shadow of the Collector, with dots in between. Yeah, you can follow me there and share some of the experience and give me some feedback about how we did. Masa?
Yeah, my Instagram handle is Masa Charvinen09. Maybe I should just spell it. It's MASA JARVINEN09. But yeah, what about you guys, Arnie and Paul? Like, how can the listeners find you guys?
My name's Arnaldo. My Instagram handle is welcome to the game #2. So welcome #2 the game. And yeah, you can just find me on Instagram. Please let us know how we did. Leave us a review wherever you're listening to this, because I'm sure that would be very helpful to us.
Indeed.
And my handle is 8-bit yarns, one word and the number 8.
So yeah, I guess that's all, and we haven't quite figured out the schedule for these episodes yet, but we are at least trying to do this once a month. And we are also looking for guests to join the show. So if you are interested, just let us know. You can contact any of us on Instagram. Yeah, just leave a comment or send a private message, and yeah, we will hopefully make it happen.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you all. Until next episode.
Yeah, thanks guys, and peace out.